All right, I think we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of Ollaa's live discussions. My name is Biftu Adema, and I am one of the volunteers for Ollaa's education department. I'm here with Darartu, who is also a volunteer for the education department, and our guest for today is Mr. Demmeksa. Our discussion for today is based on the Gada system class that Ollaa is providing. But before we go into our discussion, I wanted to give Mr. Demmeksa an opportunity to introduce himself.
Thank you, Biftu. As you mentioned, my name is Deribie Demmeksa. I prefer to be called Demmeksa. That is simple and I like that. I am the author of Gada System, Heritage of Humanity. I had been a lecturer in several universities in Ethiopia. I was also a guest lecturer at the University of Feasta in Germany. In the last 10 years, I have had time to study and write a lot about Oromo, the Gada system, and also about the political system in Ethiopia. I have published 4 books, but my interest is on the Oromo because I am Oromo. That is very close to me.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Demmeksa. We're glad to have you here today. Welcome. Darartu and I will be moderating this discussion. I think that it was needed that 2 of us take on Mr. Demmeksa. He's a brilliant guy and he's got a lot of knowledge, and I couldn't handle him alone. So me and Darartu are going to take him on for today's discussion. Darartu, do you want to start?
Yes, so again, thank you for being with us today. As the topic of our discussion today, we wanted to ask, what is the Gada system, and if you can give us some background and history on that.
Well, it's not easy to explain what the Gada system in a very brief period of time or in a couple of minutes. But simply put, Gada system is a socio-political system of the Oromo nation of Northeast Africa or East Africa that has been a form of government, a form of social organization, a form of cultural administration for the Oromo people. And it is a democratic system, uh, but for the most part, it is a republican system where the people decide by themselves who would lead them for how long, and where the people themselves make laws, and those laws are fully respected by the people. And also, it's a system that has structured the Oromo polity into vertical as well as horizontal structures where authorities and powers are shared both vertically as well as cross sectionally across the entire Oromo nation.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Demmeksa. My question for you is, do we find the Gada system in other countries or nations apart from Oromia? And can you elaborate that in relation to other Cushitic people? And also, why is it very common in Oromia?
Well, I think it is very important to take a little bit aback so that we can review very briefly the possible route of evolution of the Gada system itself. Fundamentally, Gada system has its root in the age system of many of the African societies, particularly the African societies in the northeastern region of Africa. In other words, it is a very common practice among the Cushitic people to have a social structure which is based on age and age grades. And what the Gada system added to that is the Gada grade system. And we are not sure which one came first, but the assumption so far is that there was the age system first, then the Oromo made it an advanced form of socio-political organization by adding the Gada grade system and also other values which are based on the laws that the people made at different stages of the evolution of the Gada system. In general, we can say Gada system is in certain ways part of the cultural elements of the Cushitic people of Northeast Africa. In that way, we can associate the Gada system to all the Cushitic people in the region. What makes the Oromo very special is that the Oromo took, the initiative to pioneer in further advancing it in such a way that it became the holistic system of the Oromo nation. But gradually, we also see that other nations in East Africa, mainly the Cushitic nations and some of the Nilo-Saharan nations, also have adopted part of the Gada system. And of course, it is a matter of degree as to which nation adopted most of the Gada system and which have adopted just small part of it. We can see an example of the Gada system, which has been adopted largely by the Sidama nation, for example, by the Konso nation, by the Bulji, and so on and so forth, in Ethiopia, which shows that it has been adapted from the Oromo Gada system. Even the namings, the terminologies of the Gada grades are very, very similar. We can also see that, for example, in Kenya, uh, also in northern Tanzania, the Masai people have adopted some elements of the Gada system as well. The Sakwe people, of course, the Oromo people in Kenya practice Gada system, though it has been somehow evolved in a way that it has incorporated some elements of the local political administration or the political system, including what the colonialists have imposed on the people of this region. So, in general, we can see that Gada system is fundamentally the system of the Cushitic people, but the Oromo made it very, very advanced. And we can take back up to 3,000, 4,000. Some even claim further than that, that the Gada system has been the practice or had been in practice in Upper Egypt. And some scholars also claim that, I would agree with them, Gada system is contemporary to the Athenian democracy. There are evidences there are evidence that suggests Gada system was part of the civilization of the pre-dynastic Egyptians. These pre-dynastic Egyptians are today represented very much both in culture, facial features, and figures by the Oromo people of East Africa.
Well, thank you, Mr. Demmeksa. That was a very thorough answer. Darartu?
Yes, thank you. Well, my question was, I think you already kind of answered it, but I was curious to know about like the origins and how the Geda system evolved in other African countries and what their connections are to the Oromo people and the original history of. I know you had said a little bit about right now about Egypt and everything, but if you could elaborate more.
Yeah, I will try. When we think of Gada system, we are somehow obliged to think of the historical development that took place in Northeast Africa. As far as modern history is concerned, we only know that Egyptian civilization is one of the most known civilization in Northeast Africa. But if we ask who were those Egyptians, of of course, the answer can't be the Egyptians of today. And evidences and research show that the ancient Egyptians, particularly the pre-dynastic Egyptians, were Cushitic peoples of East Africa. And among those, the majority, or as some researchers call it, the stem of the Cushitic nations in East Africa are the Oromo. And of course, Egypt was big, big empire. It has magnificent history. It has lots of cultural elements, civilization, including religion, and so on and so forth. What we know, or what studies or historical evidence that we could find readily these days suggests is that the Oromo were part of the pre-dynastic Egyptian. And many researchers have made very clear that if there is any nation that can represent the pre-dynastic Egyptian, those who created Egyptian civilization, are the Oromo of today. But when we talk of the Oromo of today, it is really not possible to clearly segregate the ethnogenesis of the Oromo from the Afar, from the Beja, from the Agao, or from any other Cushitic nation in East Africa. But we know that the Oromo have always been the majority of those Cushitic nations, as they are today. And because of that, we argue that the Oromo represents the ancient Egyptians much better than the claims that emerge from other parts of Africa. Of course, we are aware that people in West Africa, in Central Africa, in East Africa, and Oromos in East Africa, and even people in the Middle East claim that they are the owners of the ancient Egyptian civilization. But the Oromo claim it not simply because we were part of Africa, but still we live part of the cultural element and the civilization manifested during the ancient Egypt still today in Ethiopia. If we think of the Oromo mode of thinking, the Oromo way of giving thanks to their creator, the monotheistic belief of the Oromo in one Waka, and the philosophy, the cosmology, and everything points to the fact that the Oromo cultural elements, which we can observe today, are very much connected to the civilization of ancient Egypt that has left behind perhaps all the civilization that we know of today. So, when the Oromo, particularly from the Upper Egypt, started to crisscross the East Africa region due to many reasons, they have left behind this element of the ancient Egyptian civilization. And as some Abyssinian writers have claimed that the Oromo were not part of at least the northern part of modern Ethiopia, which is very farcical. The Oromo have moved from the Upper Egypt, which is now Sudan, through the northern Ethiopia to central Ethiopia to the Great Lake region, and perhaps up to Madagascar. And through all these process moves, backward and forward moves that the Oromo nation have made across the entire East Africa region, they have left behind some imprints of the ancient Egyptian civilization. That is what we see today when you look at the Karayu people, how they dress, and when you look at the Sidama people, many of the Oromo people, the Arsi ladies, for example, the Harari, the Eastern Oromo people, up to for example, to the Tutsis of Uganda and many of the nations in Rwanda. They have taken in with them the cultural elements, in other ways, the civilization of ancient Egypt, in a form of, fainted manifestation today with them. So we can say that through these old processes, the Oromo have maintained that civilization, and that part of civilization has been encapsulated in the Gada system as we know it today.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of learning from me. So thank you. Um,
Yes. Yes, thank you, Mr. Demmeksa. There was a lot that I didn't know either that you elaborated on and really taught. But let's just go a little bit broader. And can we talk about the similarities and differences of the Gada system in comparison not to other African countries and nations, but in general, like modern democracy, republicanism, and federalism? How would you compare and contrast the Gada system?
Well, I think it is good to take it one by one. Um, I am aware and I read, I also agree in part that Gada system is a democracy, but not exactly the democracy of the classical Western democracy that we know of today. But when we look closely, we find that the Gada system fulfills all the basic requirements to be called a democracy. In a democratic system, what we have is sovereignty of the people, the rule of law, freedoms, an array of freedoms, and regular elections. And these are the foundations of uh, democracy. Of course, limited government as well as limited time of government. These all are taken care of in the Gada system. Not only these all, but even more has been incorporated in the Gada system. In modern democracy, we don't we don't see some kind of institutionalized encouragement for the citizen to take part in the politics of their country or the state. But in the Gada system, we know that every Oromo belongs to one of the five Gada parties. That means that is a kind of encouragement for everybody to take part actively in the political system of the nation or of that society. Furthermore, we see that in Geda system, power is divided not only uh, across the spectrum of the administration, but also vertically. As you might be aware, in the Oromo society, we have this vertical structure where we have this dual multi system, particular community, a small polity, small political institution, whatsoever we call it, maybe Mecha or Tulama or some group in Mecha or just the Borana of southern Ethiopia. You have two groups, and this system has check and balance of uh, very important role in the political system. In the vertical structure, the Kalus are the leaders. In the horizontal structure, in the party system, the elected Abagadas are the leaders. And in this horizontal structure alone, power is divided. And you know, this so called separation of power, which is taken as the alpha omega of classical democracy, had been practiced among the Oromo several centuries before the America itself was founded. So it was there. And even beyond that, the Gada system has integrated not only just the political and some cultural elements, but also the social life. The society is organized according to the Gada system. The cultural elements, particularly the key cultural values of the Oromo society are part of the Gada system itself. And also the ritual system, which are very crucial for spiritual life of the Oromo, are also incorporated in the Gada system. When I say this, I don't mean that the Gada system controls the belief of the Oromo. No, this is one area of misunderstanding as I observe it. In the Gada system, the spiritual life is part of the system, but Gada system does not prescribe any form of belief or religion to any member. So long as you believe in one God, you are welcome, whether you are Muslim or Christian or whichever denomination of Protestants you belong to. What Gada system organizes is that, okay, as a community of a nation, let's give thanks to our Creator, one God. And as I said before, the Oromo believe in one God, that is Waka. And this God, they assume that supersede any other name or form of God that exists in other societies. For the Oromo, according to the belief system, if somebody believes in God, say he is a Muslim, he is welcome. He can give thanks to Waka together with other Oromo. But through time, there are some elements, particularly in central Oromia and some part of western Oromia, that have somehow devolved the Kalu institution into uh, what locally what's locally known as Kadicha, which has nothing to do with the Kalu system or the Gada system. That, I should say, adulteration of the belief system that is connected to the Gada system might have influenced it in a certain negative way. Otherwise, the Gada system has incorporated the spiritual elements of the Oromo society as well. So, when we talk of the Gada system, it's not only the politics, it's also culture, it's also how the society is organized, it's also how the spiritual life of the nation is guided. And it also has the economic elements into that. So, in comparison to the Western democracy, Gada system has more advanced concepts that have been proven to be of value for the harmonic existence of the society. Just when we talk of harmony as well, we also know that Gada system has even an environmental element into that. We may go to this in details some other time. So, in short, in comparison to modern democracy, Gada system has many features which would benefit the society as it has benefited the Oromo for a long, long period of time. Second, when we look at Republican system is a system where the people make the law not by majoritarian principle, but where everybody takes part in the lawmaking process, and each and everybody is convinced that that law should pass. In the Oromo society, it is not by majority like 50 plus 1 that laws are made. Laws are made by sovereign Oromo sitting together in the council, discussing the law, taking time, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, until consensus is reached. That is how it is, how laws are made. And also the justice system is not based on the majority system. It's not that if two of the three judges, agree, then you are doomed. That doesn't work in society. Consensus has to be reached. If it is not possible to reach consensus in that way, the Oromo believe that maybe there is a problem on how the law was made. Of course, this system works when the society or the polity is smaller. In a nation of 100 million people, that may be extremely difficult. But in the Gada system, we also have decentralization of powers and institutions. By this, I am going to come to the federal system, which is again an internal element in the Gada system. As I mentioned before, society is organized in a dual moti system. And every big dual moti, the first dual moti that we know is the Corona and Barento. Under each of them, we have the cascading dual submotis system, which goes up to what we call the Belbela. And in these all structures, authority is delegated to the lower structure. Lower assemblies have the right to make certain laws which are pertinent to their livelihood, their local situations, and so on and so forth. But this does not include making the constitution or what we call the principles, Gada principles. The principles or constitutions, which we call Hera Gada in Afan Oromo, are made only by the biggest body, and under that constitution, each lower authority or lower assembly has a power to make laws. And this kind of system is in line with what we know today as a decentralized form of federal system. And this decentralized form of federal systems have been referred to as confederacies by some authors. There were so many confederacies among the Oromo nation. These confederacies have been built based on the dual moti system and a decentralization of authority. And based on this, we can say that Gada system has a federal element into it, and Gada system has practiced the decentralized federal system for a long, long time. This decentralization has had its own drawbacks, and I don't want to go to that for now. So, just to summarize, Gada system is very advanced form of socio-political organization that also includes the cultural and spiritual elements, including environmental elements. And it fulfills the basic requirement to be called a democracy. And at the same time, it is based on republican ideas where the people themselves directly make the laws, and it is not based on majoritarian principle. It is based on decision by every sovereign Oromo to make laws, and also the justice system goes accordingly. And Gada system also has a federal structure, and that federal structure has been identified as confederacies or Oromo confederacies throughout history, and that has its own pros and cons.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Demmeksa. Before we move on to the next question by Darartu, I had a question for you that just popped into my mind. You mentioned earlier that the Gada system does not impose religion or choose religion for the people, correct? Yes, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so my question then is that could you safely say that there is an appropriate level of separation between government and or state and religion? And how would they relate to those who don't recognize Waka? I know that you talked about as long as you recognize that there's one God, so whether you're Muslim or Christian, you're welcome into this system. So how do they relate to those that don't recognize Waka, or say, for example, those that recognize multiple gods? And then is there that safe boundary or that safe separation between church and state or religion and state?
In the Gada system, religion and government, or let's call it state for purpose of clarity, are separate. That's why we have the Kalu system as the Kalu institution and the Geda institution. The two are separate.
Okay.
And the Gada institution does not involve itself in the activities or roles of the Kalu institution. The Kalu institution as well doesn't involve itself in the activities of the Gada institution. That is why the Kalu institution stands by itself. It is independent. It faces no influence the from the state or from the Gada institution. The Gada institution is a form of government and it is a cross-sectional. When I say cross-sectional, every member in the Oromo society is part of the Gada system. It is a government by the people. Of
Okay.
course, we can add for the people, in line with the American way of saying it.
Yeah.
And the Kalu institutions do not involve themselves in the administration. They are concerned only about the spiritual life of their society. Even though the Kalus do not prescribe any form of religion to the people. Of course,
Okay.
they pray according to the traditions among the Oromo society prescribe that the Oromo have a form of belief. That belief is belief in Waka. As we all know, other religions are relatively recent phenomena. And before Judaism, there was Wakefana. Way, way before Judaism, there was Wakefana. And Judaism is a form of Wakefana in a way, because it's also monotheistic and it's a belief in one creator. And Christianity and Islam are also monotheistic, and they are, you know, religions that have come to humanity later than Wakefana. And because of this early or very ancient nature of Wakefana, Wakefana has tolerated almost all new religions that have emerged in Northeast Africa. In that way, Wakefana accepted the belief of any member, but still the cultural elements presume that the Oromo believe in one Waka. But Gada system is not rigid. It is very, very dynamic because it's the people who make the law and then the people who can change the constitution, the people who can adapt it the way it fits to the time. So even though we don't have records of an assembly where the Oromo sat down and decided on this, we can safely say that Gada system has tolerated all forms of monotheistic religion, all forms of non-belief as well, provided that the people are guided by, the principle of Naga, for example, and the principles of equality. These are the key elements in the Gada constitution as well. So yes, there is separation of religion or spiritual life and political life. The two do not
Okay.
mix at all. And also Gada system tolerates other form of beliefs or non-beliefs outside of Wakefana. So if
Okay.
you are a Muslim and I am a Christian, we can freely go to any Wakefana ritual, for example, to the Recha, and give thanks to our God. There is no problem at all. And the Gada system as a political system does not impose any form of restriction on the way people think, the way people live. It's only the cultural elements which stay for a long time, which
Mhm.
are maybe encouraging some people to give opinions that, okay, the Gada system prescribes this kind of religion and so on. So on. But in reality, that is not the case. Everybody is welcome in the Gada system. There is safety of separation of religion and the political system. And the Kalus are not priests the way, for example, some Christian priests operate in Ethiopia, in Ethiopian Orthodox Church, for example. They are not the same. Kalus are only leaders which gives spiritual guidance to members of the society. They may pray for you, may organize some cultural elements, they may organize and lead some rituals, but they do not prescribe anything to you. Because in the Wakefana system, you believe in Waka, there is no other body between you and Waka. You can directly converse with Waka, you can ask whatever you want, you can ask what in whichever way you want. There is no such dogmatic principle involved in Wakefana system. You are free. There is nothing between you and your God or your Waka. And everybody who believes in Waka is part of this spiritual community of the Oromo nation. That is how it is. I hope I have answered just part of the question.
You have. Thank you, Mr. Demmeksa.
Well, thank you. And going back a little bit to the similarities between the Gada system and modern like structures of government, do you think that it's practically feasible to reintroduce the Gada system for governance into today's society? Is the system compatible, would you say, with existing socio-political realities of the Oromo people, or do we just learn the historic narratives of the system for the purpose of learning?
In my opinion, the answer to that question is a resounding yes. It is possible to reintroduce the Gada system in a way it fits to, the modern way of life in Ethiopia or even elsewhere. The question is, are we ready? For me, we are not that ready at the moment because the fundamental understanding of Gada system, even among the Oromo, is not deep rooted. That worries me a lot. We, the Oromo, may talk about Gada system. We may take lots of pride that the Oromo have used this system or created this system and so on. But when we come to the good understanding of it, not everybody measures up to that. This suggests to me that a lot is yet to be done, that people really understand Gada system very well. Unless you understand it, you just give opinion, like many people, mostly hate-driven people, give bad opinion about Gada system, even without knowing what it really is. So, if the Oromo work on it, and if people are educated about the Gada system, and see that it is a system which has been evolving over, you know, many centuries, perhaps a couple of millennia, we see that it is particularly for the African context and with the social integration and social relationships that we have today in East Africa region. I think it could be a savior. We know Western democracy has its own limitations. We know Western democracy is also evolving. We know Western democracy is captured by capitalists. This is a fact. But Gada system is free of that. And also, it is an indigenous system. As we mentioned earlier, we have to take pride that the civilization that we know of in the West today originated from Africa. And with that in mind, if we work on it, particularly every Oromo 50 or 60 million strong, really understand what it is and help others understand what it is, I think it is very easy for some African nations to adapt this system after some time. And with regards to the mode of life that we have today, particularly with coming into scene of this advanced technology, particularly communication technology, I see it as an opportunity to disseminate what the knowledge about the system. And of course, always the political system has to be dynamic. Humanity has been for long, stuck on a particular system, which is proved to be not perfect, but still we maintain that. And that kind of dynamism, or that kind of taking comfort on what is at hand, and not even trying to practice what had been proved to be useful and has organized this society for centuries, is a bit of weakness that we can see both from our scholars and also from everyone in every walk of life. So I see that it's really important that we work on this, and I see that it can be introduced as an alternative to Western democracy, and I believe that it would work much better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demmeksa. So, in honor of Women's History Month, I thought that this question was a valid one. And I wanted to ask, so within the system of governance, right, what rights, if any, does the Gada system ensure to women as inalienable rights? For example, within the Constitution of the United States, we know that the right to liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness, it may not always be upheld, but it's there in writing as inalienable rights to all human beings. So, what kind of rights are ensured to women within the system, or to anyone, for that matter?
Well, that is really a very important question, and I also had that at the back of my mind because I have observed that some people have overlooked one very critical institution of the world, which is also connected, or I can say complementary to the Gada system, the CK institution. As Gada, institution is for historically for men, because men are the dominant participant in the Gada system. The CK institution was or is for women. And the CK institution has no less power than the Gada institution in every regard. Actually, in the Oromo society, the women control most of the activities of the men. Of course, as it had been, the same practice among the societies, which now say they are civilized, and now they say that women have equal rights with the men. Women historically had been marginalized, particularly from the political activities and from public life. That was also a culture or a tradition among the Oromo society for many, many centuries. But those days are gone now. Now we are in a different era. Even during those days, the Gada system did not marginalize the Oromo. Of course, priority, particularly the Gada grading institutions, given priority to male. And but when we consider household, the very the fundamental principle in the Gada system is that the head of the household is a sovereign. And when the head of the household is sovereign, his wife is also sovereign. As he is a king, she is a queen. That is part of the system itself. But men practically go to the assemblies and they take debates and they involve themselves in the election and so on and so forth. This doesn't mean women won't have that right. Women, a woman could be had a Gada in the Gada system. There is no limitation or there is no law that has ever prevented a woman from becoming a Bagada. Historically, there were some women who became a Bagada after their husband and a Bagada have been diseased. That we know. And the basic misunderstanding, which is also taken as a point of attack against the Gada system, particularly by people who haven't understood the Gada system very well, is that, oh, Gada system doesn't give any place for women and marginalizes them and so on and so on and so forth. Not that much, not exactly that way. Of course, a lot has to be done to uplift the level of political participation of women in the Gada system. We have to work on that. But Gada system doesn't deny equality of women with men, and it doesn't give any less of privilege or rights to women, and it considers a woman as a complementary part of a man. And when we say a household is head of the household is sovereign, we mean the man and his woman. And of course, you know that you can't be, ritually complete a Bagada if you don't have a wife. So that itself says a lot. And yet, uh, I believe that there are some issues, particularly on the level of political participation. I mean, public life of women in the Gada system has to be improved. And in that, I would suggest that in the Gada system, women also should be had a Gada with the same footing as the men and Bagadas. And that part, I think, is a homework for every Oromo. And as I said, Gada system is dynamic, and the people make the law. People can make the law. People can make the constitution to decide in this direction. That is how I see it. I hope I have answered your question.
You have. Thank you, Mr. Demmeksa. That was very encouraging to hear. I'm glad that there is definitely room for women to be involved. And there's also an acknowledgement on your part that there is also room for improvement. So, in connection to that, what are some other limitations of the Gada system? Most of the time, the Gada system has been appreciated as an egalitarian system, but the system is not always perfect. And so, can you identify some basic limitations in addition to what you've mentioned that you have personally noticed within the Gada system?
Um, it's difficult to say outright that data system has this limitation or that limitation. In the evolution of the system, the people saw, certain issues with some level of higher importance or degree of importance, and because of that, we see that in the past the practice might have been uh, retrospectively might have been, with some limitation. And understanding, I wouldn't say limitation, but uh, something that becomes a little bit of problematic is the issue of right births, and also the time it takes to groom a future leader. It takes over 24 years to groom a Bagada. That is a long, long period of time. And we also have this almost hereditary type of a party system. You are born to the party of your father. In that case, of course, if you want to change the party, you can do it. But in the society, yet that level of freedom is not welcome, because in the Oromo society, as in many other societies, we believe in succession of the sons to the position, or even to higher position of their fathers. We have been very patriarchal society. That influence is there. And I think that is not a weakness by itself. It's only a matter of um, to what extent or to what degree this can be, a limitation on some freedoms, for example. Instead of becoming member of the party of Melba because my father is or my father was, I can choose to be a member of the other party. And of course, this passage rights every 8 years, be it along the rigid age grades or along the Gada grades. Um, Maybe, as a free society, you may not really think that we really need to do that. But it also has its own importance on the other aspects of the society, particularly on the social structuring and on the participation and so on and so forth. The main purpose of having these fixed five parties that somehow equally distributes the Oromo society into these five parties is to encourage equal participation. And you can view that as disadvantage or as an advantage. That depends on the perspective upon which you want to look at that. I would look at that as a positive because I see in the Western democracy, we live in Western democracy, we know that the political participation of the citizen has been dwindling. You know what campaign it takes for to get people to go out and vote. And some people even do not want to discuss politics. That is an abdication of your own right to minority so that they can take part and decide for you. But in the Oromo society or in every Oromo polity, if the Gada system is fully functional, you have a party and you are motivated by the system itself to take an active part in deciding what is right for you, whether it is making a law or amending the constitution or making local regulations and so on and so forth. The Oromo are a society of assemblies, as many scholars put it. And those assemblies encourage an active participation of members. But in the West, we don't have that. Because of that, few people decide for the majority. That, from that perspective, you can view the system in the Gada system as very advantageous. But on the other hand, you can also have another perspective. Okay, why am I forced to take part in politics when I don't have an interest? I don't care if anybody makes that decision and so on and so forth. And, of course, there are so many latent political ideals which are going around, which appear to be motivated by this absolute freedom or the need to have an absolute freedom, or the wish to have the feeling of having an absolute freedom. And it's up to the society and partly up to the history to decide if which one is really, you know, good or bad or pro or con. But in the Gada system, we also have those kind of questionable or debatable uh, elements of the system. But again, I go back to what I have said earlier. And in the Gada system, it is the active participation of each and every member of the polity that decides on what is right and what should be included, what should not be included, and so on. So that dynamism by itself can take care of some of these elements. It can smoothen, you know, what appears to be like popping up and giving some discomfort. It is possible to correct those kind of things and make it an up to date and fully functional system.
Thank you, Mr. Demmeksa, for the thorough answer.
Yeah. So you said a couple times that in the Gada system, all members of the Oromo community are included. And so my question is that is the Gada system harmonized, and do all Oromo people know and claim ownership of the Gada system? And is there a common understanding about the system among Oromos? Like, for instance, do the Borana Oromo and the Macha Oromo tell us similar things about the Gada system? And if you would say no, like, why would you say no?
Um, at different points in time, there had been divergences on what is really important to a particular community of Oromo. In that case, for example, the Mecha Oromo, which are also Borana, by the way, Mecha and Tulama are also Borana. The Borana are just, some people consider the Borana of southern Oromia are only the Boranas. They are the Borana of southern Oromia. The Mecha and Tulama are also Boranas. And for the Mecha people, at certain point, the emphasis might have shifted towards how to integrate other minorities communities, for example. Then in the Mecha regions, they might have added other form of social integration which was not practiced before or which did not take place in other regions. This has its own imprint on making how Gada system is practiced among the Mecha slightly different from how Gada system is practiced, for example, in the Eastern Oromia. These kind of minor differences, which came to being as a result of the need to adapt to a particular social issue or particular geography or particular circumstance of political events, do not make the Gada system different. It only enriched it and adds value to that, adds another dimension to that. Because of this, particularly following the expansion of the Oromo from central modern Ethiopia to western or southwestern regions, and also up north in their effort to recapture their land that had been taken away from them. There were an aggressive expansion in a short period of time, and during that short period of time, the political turmoil, particularly the clash between the Christian Abyssinian kingdom as well as the eastern Muslim principalities and sultanate, had resulted in some form of change of features of the Gada system itself, either through the locally made laws or through the adapted cultural elements. The whole purpose is to have an harmonious coexistence with other people and to be able to integrate other people into the Oromo society. These are additional features that came into being through the process of you know, evolution of the Gada system itself. That does not constitute to difference among the Gada system or difference among the practices of the Gada system in or among the Oromo people. However, we cannot deny that in some regions, Gada system lost its credibility so much so that the the Badulas could usurp the power from the Abagadas and make themselves into king. That is the reality that we know of what happened in the Gibe region, for example, when five Abadulas formed five multi-systems, and that's also the same when we come to the Lake region in the country as well. So through this process, there were lots of ups and downs. This is a recent history. Even long before that, we know Gada system was interrupted for a couple of centuries, particularly between the 9th and the 12th century. This, this time is sometimes referred to as Chinna Gada, the discontinuation of the Gada system. But after that, around the mid of 15th century, the Oromo have to, decide to renew their Gada system. They did so. They included new system, particularly they strengthened the Hiria institutions, the ACES institution, which supplied um, very large fighting force. And these kind of things could happen. It could happen in a region. It could happen throughout um, the Oromo nation. It can happen. This doesn't make it that Gada system is practiced in different forms and styles in different places. No. However, we have to acknowledge that because of geographic separations and because of this gradually evolving uh, focus focus points and issues and so on, even the namings of the Gada grades and the age set grades have been different among different Oromo communities. This is this is an issue that scholars have to take up and try to harmonize across the entire Oromo nation. Not only the Oromo who reside in modern Ethiopia, but also the Oromo who lives outside of modern Ethiopia. By the way, the Oromo also live not only in Kenya, but also in Uganda, in Rwanda, in northern Tanzania, as a decent communities of the Oromo nation. These Oromo, particularly in the Great African Great Lake region, even had a very vast empire, which we know by the name Kitwara Empire. And countries like Rwanda, Uganda, uh, were very substantial Oromo communities have resided as segregated descent groups of the Oromo. Even the namings that we know of in that region today have an Oromo element into that. they are Oromo names. So, of course, it's not possible to say that everywhere Gada system is practiced the same way. No. In some places where the impact, particularly from the Abyssinia kingdom or empire of Ethiopia, had been very strong, the Gada system was weakened so much so that people had given hope on the system. Yet, even though it was not a political system, it stayed as a cultural system of the Oromo society, even through the time of Emperor Haile Selassie, the Derg time, and so forth. In other places, Gada system has been in a continued practice, particularly among the southern Borana and Guji. Oromo Gada system has been in continued practice. But, you know, this doesn't make that Gada system was discontinued or there was no Gada system in this region of the Oromia. We can't say that. It's not possible to say that. I'm mentioning this because I hear some people arguing in such a way that the Gada system was dead and it's not possible to resurrect it. And yeah, of course, we know why people who say that say it. So uniformity is not expected. Variations are welcome, and it's possible to harmonize the Gada system today. And of course, it takes lots of work. And I hope after some years, we will see some encouraging results from the integration of Gada system in the school system in Oromia and in Addis Ababa recently.
Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Demmeksa. All of this information is wonderful, and I would hope that those who are listening are feeling more inspired and a greater desire to join the Gada class that Ollaa is actually offering. Can you tell us a little bit about the contents of the course and what you expect the students to learn?
Sure. This course is an introductory course on Ollaa platform. I will be teaching that course, and that course will take 10 weeks. And in this course, I would like to introduce to the participants the Gada institutions, both the age set and the Gada grade institutions. These are very fundamental institutions to understand the Gada system. And I would also introduce the Gada constitution. In the Oromo society, we have this say that Heri Shantama, Seri Ibashanif Shantama. It simply means the Gada constitution or the Gada principles are 50, but the Gada laws are 550. Maybe that was true at certain point.
Sorry, Demmeksa, can you just speak a little bit louder? I'm seeing in the comments that you're not being heard.
Let me repeat. We have this saying among the Oromo, and they say, "Heri Shantama, Seri Ibashanif Shantama." Literally, that means the Gada principles or constitutional clauses are 50, and the Gada laws are 550. That may be true at a particular point in time in the history of Gada system. It may not be true today, but it has a profound indication that the Oromo have separated the concept of constitution and the concept of law. And so I will introduce the participants to these Gada constitutions. 18 of these Gada constitutions or principles have been identified by Professor Mulugeta. Any student of Gada system knows Professor Mulugeta very well. But they are not the only ones. I have tried to find out the remaining Gada principles, and I have included them in my book. Also, the participants will have an overview of what the concept of Gada system entails and how Gada system is related to modern democracy and federalism. And also, I would introduce the participants to the historical development of the Gada system based on the Abyssinian records and some records by Western travelers and missionaries. They have recorded very useful information about the Gada system, particularly starting from early 17th century, and we use that to shed light on how Gada system was practiced before the Abyssinian domination in modern Ethiopia, and also how Gada system has been maintained by some communities like the Kabayu, the Borana, while Gada system was lying in other regions of Oromia. In the end, I think the participants will have an overview of what Gada system is and how it functions and how it compares to other political systems and how it could be adapted by other nations and societies to advance human civilization. And of course, this course is an introductory course. We may not go into details, but I would be very willing to go a little bit extra, to go in depth to explain it to people who have special interest, to dig a little bit deeper.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is all great to hear. Um, for you, who do you think is like the target audience for this class, and who should participate for the class and sign up?
Um, I think um, anybody who wants to have better understanding of the Gada system would benefit from this course. So the target is broad. For example, if an Oromo wants to improve his understanding or her understanding of the Gada system, they can join. At the same time, I would wish to have people who have spoken against the Gada system or have written, of course, without having much understanding, negatively about the Gada system to join and learn about the Gada system. I would also expect some Western scholars who might have some interest to do research on the Gada system or other social systems in Ethiopia or in Africa to join this course. So the target is not only Ethiopians, not only Africans, but everybody who has an interest to join this. And this is a first course, and based on the feedbacks that we will receive, we will try to improve both our approach and content, depending on the demand and the interest that we shall observe during this first course.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Demmeksa. And there you have it. That is our discussion for today. Thank you so much, Darartu, for being here and for helping me moderate this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Demmeksa, for the enormous amount of knowledge that you've given us concerning the Gada system and for even sparking interest in some people. For those of you who are interested Registration deadline is March 30, so you have 5 days to register. Classes will begin in April, and the class, the Gada system class, will be taught by Mr. Demmeksa. So please, 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 if you're interested, be sure to register, and we hope to see you guys there and at our next discussion. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right, take care.